Eric Thompson stood on the beach in Playa del Carmen at 4 a.m., staring at his phone screen. The email was clear, effective immediately. His teaching contract was terminated. His bank account showed $4,200. His visa expired in 23 days. He was 44 years old, alone in a foreign country, and every person who'd warned him not to come had been right. What he did in the next 30 days would either prove them wrong or confirm their worst predictions. This is a story of a man who traded stability for freedom, and the brutal moment when he almost lost both. If you want more true stories of bold decisions and the people who risk everything to reinvent their lives, subscribe now so you never miss the next leap. For 16 years, Eric Thompson taught American history at Roosevelt High School on Chicago's South Side. He made $68,000 a year. He had tenure, health insurance, a pension that would kick in at 62. On paper, he had security. In reality, he was dying inside. Every morning at 5:45 a.m., the alarm would shatter whatever restless sleep he'd managed. By 6:30, he was in his car, scraping ice off the windshield in February, sweating through his shirt in September. The commute took 47 minutes each way. The job itself had become a bureaucratic nightmare. Standardized test prep instead of actual teaching. Parent emails at 11 p.m. demanding grade changes. Faculty meetings about new assessment protocols that solved nothing. He spent more time on paperwork than with students. He'd started teaching because he wanted to inspire kids. 16 years later, he was just trying to survive until summer break. His marriage had ended 3 years earlier. His ex-wife said he'd become emotionally absent. His daughter was in college in California and called once a month out of obligation. His father, a retired union electrician, kept asking when Eric would settle down and stop complaining. At 44, Eric looked in the mirror and saw a stranger, gray hair appearing faster than it should. 20 pounds he couldn't lose. Eyes that looked tired even after vacation. He'd spent 2 weeks in Playa del Carmen the previous winter, a solo trip to decompress. Walking the beach at sunrise, eating tacos for $2, watching expats living simple lives in the sun. The contrast with Chicago was devastating. Back in his classroom, winter bleeding into spring, Eric couldn't stop thinking about those 2 weeks. About what life could be like without the commute, the meetings, the slow suffocation of routine. The question became impossible to ignore. What if he just left? The breaking point came on a Tuesday in April. Eric was in his 6th consecutive meeting about improving student outcomes through data-driven instruction frameworks. The principal was droning through a PowerPoint. Eric's department head was nodding along like any of this mattered. His colleagues looked as dead inside as he felt. Eric pulled out his phone under the table and did something he'd been avoiding for months. He calculated the numbers. His pension was invested for another 6 years. If he quit now, he'd only get his contributions back, roughly $31,000 after penalties and taxes. His apartment lease ended in June. He had $12,000 in savings. Total liquid assets if he walked away, $43,000. He pulled up cost of living data for Playa del Carmen. Decent one-bedroom apartments, $600 to $800 per month. Food, $300 per month. Insurance, $150 per month. Total monthly burn, roughly $1,200. Even with zero income, he could survive 35 months. But he wouldn't need zero income. English teachers in Mexico made $15 to $25 per hour doing online teaching. If he worked even 20 hours a week, he'd cover expenses. The math worked. The principal's voice faded into background noise. Eric stared at the numbers on his phone. $43,000 and a one-way ticket. That's all he needed. His heart was pounding. His palms were sweating. This wasn't a vacation fantasy anymore. This was real. This was possible. He looked around the conference room at the exhausted teachers, the fluorescent lights, the motivational posters that motivated no one. He thought about doing this for another 18 years until retirement. He couldn't. That night, Eric drafted his resignation letter. He didn't send it yet. He wanted to sleep on it, make sure he wasn't making an emotional mistake. He didn't sleep at all. By morning, the decision felt inevitable. He sent the letter to HR before he could change his mind. He gave 1 month notice instead of professional 2 weeks. Not out of generosity, but because he needed the extra paycheck. His union rep called him 2 hours later. "Eric, what the hell are you doing? You're 4 years from 50. You walk away now, you lose everything." "I've already lost everything," Eric said. "I just stopped pretending otherwise." The reaction was exactly what he expected. His department head pulled him aside after school. "You know you'll never get hired at another decent district, right? You're committing career suicide." His father's response was worse. "Your mother and I didn't sacrifice so you could throw away a pension to play beach bum in Mexico. You're 44 years old, Eric. Grow up." His sister Jen, a corporate attorney who'd never understood his lack of ambition, sent him a long email about responsibility, stability, and not running away from your problems. Even his daughter called, clearly prompted by her grandfather. "Dad, are you okay? Like mentally?" The only person who understood was Marcus, another teacher who'd left 3 years earlier to work remotely from Portugal. "Ignore all of them," Marcus said. "In 2 years, they'll be asking you for advice." Eric's last day was June 12th. The school threw a perfunctory goodbye party in the teacher's lounge. Stale sheet cake and 4 smiles. His colleagues wished him well with the kind of tone people use when they think you're making a terrible mistake. He flew to Playa del Carmen on June 15th with 2 check bags and a backpack. Everything else he'd sold, donated, or left in his sister's garage. The first 2 months were exactly what he'd imagined. He found a 1-bedroom apartment 3 blocks from the beach for $650 per month. He signed up with 2 online English teaching platforms and started getting students. His Spanish improved rapidly through necessity. By month 3, he had a routine. Morning beach walks. Teaching session from 8 a.m. to 2 p.m. Afternoons reading, exploring, occasionally meeting other expats. Dinners at local spots where a full meal cost less than a Chicago sandwich. His monthly expenses averaged $1,150. His teaching income averaged $1,800. He was actually making a profit. By month 6, he met Sophia, a Mexican woman who ran a small gallery in town. They started dating. His life was simple, peaceful, and completely different from Chicago. His father stopped returning his calls. His sister's emails became less frequent. Fine. They could judge from their mortgages and their misery. By month 10, Eric had burned through $8,000 of his savings, less than he'd budgeted. His teaching income had increased to $2,200 per month as he built regular students. He was considering getting a work visa to make everything official. Life was working. Then month 11 arrived. The email came on a Wednesday morning. Important contractor policy update. The platform he made $1,400 per month from was changing requirements. All contractors now needed teaching certifications from their home country. Eric had a bachelor's in history and a teaching license, but the license had expired 2 months after he left Chicago. He'd never bothered renewing it. He was immediately disqualified. His income dropped from $2,200 to $800 overnight. He tried picking up students on the other platform, but they were already fully staffed. He applied to 3 other teaching companies. All rejected him, no current certification. By the end of month 11, his financial situation had collapsed. His savings were down to $4,200. His income barely covered rent. He'd need to renew his teaching license from Mexico, which required paperwork, fees, and time he didn't have. Then Sophia ended things. "I care about you, Eric, but I need someone with more stability. You're living month to month. What kind of future is that?" The irony crushed him. He left Chicago to escape that exact conversation with his ex-wife. Now he was alone, nearly broke, in a foreign country. At 44 years old, his tourist visa expired in 23 days. Renewing it required leaving the country, a $400 expense he couldn't afford. Getting a proper work visa required an employer sponsor he didn't have. The walls were closing in. Eric sat on the beach at 4 a.m. because he couldn't sleep. The panic was constant now. Every scenario ended badly. Return to Chicago broke and defeated. Overstay his visa and risk deportation. Burned through his last $4,200 trying to survive. He was scrolling through job boards on his phone when he saw a posting on a local expat Facebook group. Small private school in Tulum looking for native English speaker to teach high school students. Must be willing to relocate. Housing included. Salary, 25,000 pesos/month. Eric did the math. 25,000 pesos was roughly $1,400. Not great, but with housing included, his burn rate would drop to almost nothing. But Tulum was 45 minutes away. He'd have to leave Playa, sign a contract, commit to something structured again. Wasn't escaping structure the whole point? He stared at the posting for 20 minutes. Then he remembered. The point wasn't escaping structure. The point was escaping soul-crushing, meaningless structure. The point was choosing what he committed to. He sent an email at 4:47 a.m. The school director, an American woman named Patricia, responded within an hour. She wanted to meet that afternoon. The school was small, maybe 120 students total, ages 12 to 18. Most were children of expats or wealthy Mexican families who wanted bilingual education. The campus was modest but well-maintained, set back in the jungle outside Tulum proper. Patricia was direct. I'm not going to lie. We're not paying much, but we cover housing. You get your work visa sponsored, and you're teaching actual students who want to learn. No standardized test prep. No bureaucratic nonsense. You build your own curriculum. Eric felt something he hadn't felt in years. Actual interest in teaching. The housing is basic. A small casita on campus. No beach views. But it's yours, bills included. And we have a language immersion program where you'd work alongside Mexican teachers. Your Spanish would improve significantly. She offered him the job on the spot. I can tell you actually care about teaching. Most people who apply just want visa sponsorship. Eric asked for 24 hours to think about it. He spent that night doing the math again. Income, $1,400 per month. Expenses with free housing, maybe $500 per month. He could rebuild his savings, get his visa situation legal, have actual stability while still living in Mexico. It wasn't the beach life he'd imagined, but it was sustainable. He accepted the next morning. The first week of teaching was harder than he expected. The students were bright, but challenging. The curriculum needed complete restructuring. His Spanish wasn't as good as he thought, but something was different. He was working hard, 40-hour weeks, planning lessons, meeting with parents. The same activities that had drained him in Chicago, except now he walked out his casita each morning into jungle sounds and warm air. He taught students who were genuinely curious. He collaborated with teachers who treated education as craft, not just employment. After school, he'd walk to a nearby cenote and swim in crystal clear water. Weekends, he'd drive to the beach. His life had rhythm again, but rhythm he'd chosen. 3 months into the teaching job, Patricia approached him with a proposal. We're expanding, adding a weekend workshop program for adults. Expats wanting to improve their English, locals preparing for international business. Would you be interested in running it? Extra 8,000 pesos a month. 8,000 pesos, roughly $450. His income would jump to $1,850 per month. He said yes. The weekend workshops became the unexpected breakthrough. Teaching adults who desperately wanted to learn, who'd chosen to be there, who appreciated every session. It reminded Eric why he'd become a teacher in the first place. One of his students was an American entrepreneur named Jake, who ran a small eco-tourism company in the area. Jake had moved to Mexico 5 years earlier and built a successful business leading adventure tours. After class one Saturday, Jake approached him with an idea. I've been thinking about this for a while. What if we created English immersion tours? Tourists come to experience Mexico while improving their English. You'd lead the educational component, conversation practice, cultural context, real-world language use. I'd handle all the logistics and marketing. We split 50-50. Eric almost dismissed it, but Jake showed him the business plan he'd already drafted. Small groups, week-long tours, immersive learning combined with culture experiences. They could charge $1,200 per person. Run 2 tours a month with 8 people each. That's $9,600 in revenue. Split 50/50ths for $1,800 each per month. It would mean working more. But if it succeeded, he'd be making $6,650 per month total. More than he'd made teaching in Chicago while living in Mexico where his costs were a quarter as much. Think about it, Jake said. I've got the infrastructure. I just need someone who actually knows how to teach and who gets what people are looking for when they come here. Eric thought about it for 3 days. The risk was minimal. Jake was handling the investment. The time commitment was manageable, 2 weekends a month. And it solved a problem he'd noticed. Most tourists wanted to practice English but had no structured way to do it. They ran a pilot tour in January. 6 participants. The feedback was extraordinary. People love combining adventure with practical language learning. One participant, a German executive, said it was the most useful week I've spent improving my English in 10 years. By March, they had 3 tours booked. By June, they were fully scheduled 4 months out. Jake had been right about the market, and Eric had found something he didn't know he was looking for, a way to teach that felt alive again. 18 months after that desperate 4 a.m. moment on the beach, Eric's life looked nothing like he'd imagined and better than he'd hoped. He still taught at the school 3 days a week. He enjoyed it, and the stable income covered his base expenses. The immersion tours ran twice a month, sometimes 3 times during high season. His partnership with Jake had evolved into genuine friendship. His monthly income averaged $6,200. His expenses, even with occasionally splurging, rarely topped $1,800. He was saving more money in Mexico than he ever had in Chicago. He'd rebuilt his savings to $38,000. His work visa was legal and renewable. His Spanish was fluent. But the real changes were internal. He woke up without an alarm most mornings. Not because he didn't work. He worked plenty. But because he actually wanted to, the work felt purposeful. Teaching adults who chose to learn. Running tours that combined education with adventure. Building something with his own hands instead of serving a bureaucracy. He'd started dating again. A Canadian woman named Sarah who ran a yoga studio in Tulum. Nothing serious yet, but she understood the expat life. The choice to build something different. His relationship with his family was slowly thawing. His daughter had visited for a week and admitted, "Dad, you seem happier than I've ever seen you." His sister Jen had emailed an apology, short but genuine. His father still hadn't called, but Eric had made peace with that. The most surprising change was his relationship with teaching itself. In Chicago, he'd started to hate it, not because of the students, but because everything surrounding teaching had made it impossible to actually teach. Here, teaching was what he'd always wanted it to be. Connection, growth, watching people discover capabilities they didn't know they had. His immersion tour students were professionals taking sabbaticals, retirees pursuing delayed dreams, people in transition seeking something more. He related to every single one of them. One student, a 52-year-old accountant from Boston, named Richard, pulled him aside on the last day of tour. "You know what I envy about you? You actually did it. Most of us just talk about quitting and starting over. You pulled the trigger." Eric thought about that later. Had he done it? By the standards he'd left behind, career advancement, retirement planning, conventional success, he'd failed spectacularly. But by the standards he actually cared about, autonomy, purpose, daily quality of life, work that mattered, he was succeeding in ways his former colleagues couldn't measure. His bank account was healthy. His body was healthier. He'd lost the 20 pounds. His stress-related headaches had vanished. His relationships were genuine instead of obligatory. The teaching career he thought he was abandoning, he'd actually saved, just in a completely different form. Eric's story isn't about escaping work or responsibility. It's about escaping the wrong work and the wrong responsibility. Month 11 nearly destroyed him because he'd made the classic mistake, confusing a location change with a life change. Moving to Mexico wasn't the solution. It was just the context that made the real solution possible. The real transformation came when he stopped running from teaching and started rebuilding it on his own terms. When he realized that structure isn't the enemy, meaningless structure is. The brutal irony, he ended up working more hours in Mexico than he ever did in Chicago. But they were hours he'd chosen, building something he believed in with people he actually wanted to work with. The moment on the beach at 4 a.m. broke, alone, visa expiring. That wasn't the disaster it felt like. That was the moment his romanticized fantasy died and something more real could begin. Most people considering a bold leap focus on the wrong question. They ask, what if it fails? The better question is, what happens after the initial excitement fades and reality sets in? Because it will fade. The beach gets normal. The cheap tacos become routine. The freedom becomes just another version of daily life. The question is whether you've built something sustainable underneath the fantasy. Whether you're solving real problems instead of just changing scenery. Eric's success wasn't moving to Mexico. It was what he did when Mexico stopped being magical and started being just life. When the platform dropped him, when Sophia left, when the money ran out, that's when he had to figure out what he actually wanted versus what he was running from. The teaching job at the school wasn't plan B. It was the foundation. The tours weren't lucky timing. They were opportunity recognized because he positioned himself to see it. 44 isn't too late. 16 years invested in the wrong path isn't a reason to keep walking it. Tenure and pensions and security are only valuable if they're securing a life worth living. But here's the hard truth Eric learned. Bold leaps don't succeed because you're brave enough to jump. They succeed because you're committed enough to rebuild when you land wrong. Month 11 was the real test. Not month 1 when everything was new and exciting. Month 11 when it was hard and lonely and broke, and every person who doubted him seemed right. The version of Eric who gave up then would have returned to Chicago defeated, proving everyone right about foolish midlife crises. The version who kept going, who took the teaching job, who said yes to the tours, who rebuilt instead of retreated, that version discovered something worth more than security. The ability to create options instead of accepting them. 2 years later, Eric runs 10 tours a year, teaches 2 days a week, and has been approached by a publisher about writing a guide to transitional living abroad. His income exceeds what he made in Chicago. His savings eclipse what he'd left with. But the real measure is simpler. He wakes up and feels grateful for the day ahead instead of dreading it. That's not geography. That's not luck. That's the outcome of choosing uncertainty over misery, and then doing the work to make uncertainty sustainable. If this story inspired you, subscribe and share it with someone who might be standing at the edge of their own bold leap today.